This is a definitive guide to Logic stock compressors. Let's go. For Logic Pro X users out there, I'm sure you know the 7 compressors that come with Logic, and you might not know what differences there are among them or how and when to use which one. Well, today I'm going to not only explain each compressor, but also demo each of them on vocals, high-gain metal rhythm guitars with lots of low-end spikes, drum bus, drum room mics, and strummed acoustic guitar, so you can hear how each compressor reacts differently to the same audio source. You can also download a cheat sheet I created on all these compressors in the description for easy reference when you're mixing. Lastly, in a future video, I'll be comparing each of Logic's compressor to third-party paid plugins that emulate the same hardware and see how Logic's compressors hold up. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss it. Now, I'm going to explain each compressor and then we'll try them all on different recordings. The first compressor is the Platinum Digital Compressor. This is your basic, plain, vanilla digital compressor. It's clean and transparent. It shouldn't have any kind of color or saturation. And according to Logic's manual, it has a fast transient response. We'll certainly test that out. The Studio VCA is very obviously inspired by the Focusrite Red 3 dual compressor. Very few compressors out there are red and have those kind of knobs. VCA just stands for Voltage Control Amplifier. It's completely useless to know this fact, but hey, you could impress some people on the internet with it. But you do want to remember that VCA compressors are generally very versatile because you can set the attack and release to be very fast or very slow. VCA compressors typically also have all the controls, so besides attack and release, they will have ratio, threshold, and sometimes knee. Some even offer more controls for tone shaping, like the API 2500. The Focusrite Red 3 dual compressor hardware is known to be very clean and punchy. Its output transformer is also supposed to add some non-linear enhancement to the audio source. The Studio FET compressor is based on the classic 1176 blackface, which you might have come across since there's so many plugin emulations of it. FET stands for Field Effect Transistor, another completely useless fact you can use to impress people. What isn't useless though is knowing that the 1176 compressor is known to be very punchy and colorful, and it can have a very fast attack and it adds quite a bit of saturation. The classic VCA compressor is based on the DBX160A. I know I said earlier that VCA compressors usually have all the controls and are very versatile. Well, this is a special VCA compressor because it only has a threshold control, a ratio control, and an output control, and therefore it's not as versatile as the typical VCA compressor. The original DBX160 is known to have a ton of character and color. It's not at all clean or transparent. It's a very fat sounding compressor. The vintage VCA compressor is based on the SSL bus compressor. The hardware counterpart is known to be able to glue things together and is very punchy. A lot of people love it on a drum bus or the master bus. The vintage FET compressor is based on, well, some say is based on the 1176 Blue Stripe, and some say is based on the 1176 Silverface. It doesn't really matter. This is a FET compressor very similar to the Studio FET compressor, with slightly different character and color. We'll dive more into the sound in the audio demo later in this video. The last one is the Vintage Opto compressor, which is inspired by the Teletronic LA2A optical compressor. You can easily spot an optical compressor by its lack of controls. Its main controls are usually just a gain knob and a peak reduction knob. There is no control for attack, release, or ratio. However, Logic's version does have all these controls, so I'm assuming it's not supposed to be an accurate emulation, but more like it's inspired by it. Optical compressors are known to be some of the slowest kind of compressors, but the nonlinear behavior of the attack and release make people love optical compressors for their musical and smooth compression. Because optical compressors are tube compressors, they also add some nice tube warmth and saturation to the audio. Now that you're acquainted with all 7 compressors, let's hop onto Logic, compare them on audio recordings, and find out what's good for what. So here's a dry vocal recording from my friend Alex, who's also the vocalist of my band. I created a track for each Logic compressor and put a copy of the vocal recording on each of them. Each compressor is set to the same settings, so 20 milliseconds for attack, 51 milliseconds for release, and 8 to 1 ratio. That's just how I usually set my compressors for vocals. Some compressors have a knee control, and I've set them all to 0.5. All the compressors are doing the same amount of gain reduction as well. Lastly, I made sure they're all volume matched, so we're not fooled by loudness. Let's first take a quick listen to the completely unprocessed vocals.
When did chaos become a virtue? How am I supposed to know? It's written in motion through your eyes. Keep walking backwards, maybe help to ease this shame. Things have got to be so meaningless. Living with your fame.
Amazing performance, and as you can see here, there's a lot of dynamics. So it will be very interesting to see how each compressor handles it. I'm going to start with a platinum digital compressor and go from there.
When did chaos become a virtue? How am I supposed to know? It's written in motion through your eyes. Keep walking backwards, maybe help to ease this shame. Things have got to be so meaningless. Living with your fame. When did chaos become a virtue? How am I supposed to know? It's written in motion through your eyes. Keep walking backwards, maybe help to ease this shame. Things have got to be so meaningless. Living with your fame. When did chaos become a virtue? How am I supposed to know? It's written in motion through your eyes. Keep walking backwards, maybe help to ease this shame. Things have got to be so meaningless. Living with your fame. When did chaos become a virtue? How am I supposed to know? It's written in motion through your eyes. Keep walking backwards, maybe help to ease this shame. Things have got to be so meaningless. Living with your fame. When did chaos become a virtue? How am I supposed to know? It's written in motion through your eyes. Keep walking backwards, maybe help to ease this shame. Things have got to be so meaningless. Living with your fame. When did chaos become a virtue? How am I supposed to know? It's written in motion through your eyes. Keep walking backwards, maybe help to ease this shame. Things have got to be so meaningless. Living with your fame. When did chaos become a virtue? How am I supposed to know? It's written in motion through your eyes. Keep walking backwards, maybe help to ease this shame. Things have got to be so meaningless. Living with your fame.
So, do you have your favorites? Let me know which one sounds the best to you and which one sounds the worst in the comments below, and tell me why. To my ears, the Studio VCA is a clear winner, and the Platinum Digital sounded the worst, with the Classic VCA sounding the second worst. I liked the Studio VCA the most because it was able to drastically reduce the dynamic range of the vocals and really flatten them in a really pleasant way. Even with 20 decibel of gain reduction, the vocals sounded really smooth, which is exactly what you want for great vocal compression. The Studio VCA also adds some really nice harmonic saturation to the vocals, making them a bit warmer and thicker. I thought the Platinum Digital and the Classic VCA sounded the worst because I could hear a very noticeable volume drop whenever there's a loud part, and I could hear the vocal levels fluctuate quite a lot. That is not good for vocal compression. Aside from the best and the worst, the rest of the compressors all sounded pretty similar to one another, and they sounded okay. My main problem with them is that they don't sound as smooth as I want, and you can sometimes hear the compressor coming in and out. Now, of course, I know with different settings you might get better results, because if these plugins emulations are anywhere like the hardware counterparts, their attack and release should be all different from one compressor to another, even at the same values. I just use the same settings for all for demonstration purposes. Next, we have some fast metal guitar riffs that contain a lot of palm mutes. Here's what it sounds like unprocessed. So plenty of low frequency jumps and very dynamic. Good compression on metal rhythm guitars means reducing these palm mute jumps in an unnoticeable way while retaining the punch of the palm mutes. We would need a compressor with really fast attack and release for that. Again, all the compressors have the same settings, which are fast attack, fast release, 4:1 ratio, and a hard knee if there's a knee control. All the compressors do the same amount of gain reduction as well. So let's take a listen and pay attention to the palm mutes. This time, quite a few of the compressors sounded equally good, but the Platinum Digital still sounded the worst, with the classic VCA sounding the second worst again. The Studio VCA, Vintage VCA, Vintage FET, and surprisingly, given that optical compressors are usually pretty slow, the Vintage Opto all sounded really transparent, and the compression was barely, if at all, noticeable. I feel like the Studio VCA sounded the cleanest in that it colored the audio the least, while the Vintage Opto and the Vintage VCA added a subtle but nice mid-range bite to the guitar tone. The Platinum Digital and the classic VCA, however, really struggled to keep up big time, even though I used a really fast attack and the fastest release, at least for the Platinum Digital. You can really hear the volume drop whenever a palm mute occurs, and that's not what you would want for your guitars. Now let's move on to electric bass guitar. I've got a very well played and well recorded bass track here. I'm going to play you the unprocessed version. So the playing is very consistent, but in order for it to work in a metal mix, it's still way too dynamic. And we're going to use some very heavy compression to pin it down. The compression I'm looking for is, again, a transparent and smooth one. I don't want to be able to hear the compression. I just need to really reduce the bass's dynamic range. I wouldn't mind some character from the compressor though. For this particular bass track, I have set all the compressors to 8 milliseconds for attack, 100 milliseconds for release, 4:1 ratio, and medium knee if there is a knee control. All compressors do the same amount of gain reduction. Let's take a listen. To my ears, the clear winner is the Platinum Digital. It sounded the most natural, most transparent, and the cleanest. At the same time, I also don't think there are any losers in this test. All the other 6 compressors sounded decent. It's just that none of them sounded as natural as the Platinum Digital. And I didn't like the color some of the compressors added to the bass. It's just not the right kind of color I was looking for. I would love to know which one you preferred in this case, so tell me in the comments. Next up is the drum bus, which is my favorite thing to test compressors on. Let me play you the unprocessed version. It's a very groovy and dynamic drum track with lots of snare ghost notes and very hard snare hits. We're going to hear how these different compressors will react to the drum transients. All the compressors have 50 milliseconds for attack, fastest release, 4:1 ratio, and a hard knee if there's a knee control. And they're all doing about 4 to 6 decibel of gain reduction. Let's take a listen. So immediately, I didn't like Platinum Digital at all. Its release is just not fast enough, and I'm not a fan of the pumping effect it has on the drums. But that's just me though, I know some people like some pumping on their drums. The rest of the compressors are very close. They are all slightly different, and I can see someone liking any one of these over the others. My personal favorite is the Studio VCA, and it's for a few very specific reasons. I really like that it kind of chops off the snare transients a bit in a very pleasantly aggressive way, kind of like a clipper, while maintaining the clarity and punch of both the snare and the kick. I also like that the cymbals aren't affected by the snare and the kick transients much, and I like that Studio VCA squeezes the whole drum kit in a very clean and transparent way. This really marries the snare and the kick, and it glues the whole drum kit together. I just don't like it when the snare is sticking out or when the kick gets smeared or saturated, which, by the way, can be the effect some people are looking for. Some may say that makes the drum sound thicker, which is fair, but I think it's fair to say that most of these compressors are good for drum bus compression, except for, I guess, the Platinum Digital. Next, we've got some drum room mics recordings. One of the things that mixing engineers love to do when mixing rock or metal drums is to use a compressor to smash the drum rooms, and not every compressor works well for that. So here's the unprocessed version. Very large drum room with a really awesome room sound. For a smashed drum room, personally, I'm looking for a compressor that can really clip the transient while adding quite a bit of movement or musical pumping. I also would like some pretty mild distortion from the compressor as well. I don't want it to sound too clean. All the compressors are set to 50 milliseconds for attack, fastest release, 8:1 ratio, and a hard knee if there's a knee control. The gain reduction is about 10 to 15 decibel. Let's take a listen. Very interesting. I think we have a very clear loser here, which is the Platinum Digital. It really didn't handle the transients well. In the meantime, I think all the other 6 compressors sounded really awesome, and they all have their own flavor. The Studio VCA is exceptionally clean and handles the transients, especially the ones from the kick, really well. I prefer a little bit more saturation, so this one won't be my pick, but it's damn good. My favorite would be the Vintage VCA because it clips the transients in a way I like, and I like the mild distortion you get from it. But all the other compressors, except for Platinum Digital, are good options for smashing the drum room. The last instrument we'll test the compressors on is acoustic guitar. I have a simple strummed acoustic guitar track here, and this is what it sounds like unprocessed. Very good performance and recording. I just want to reduce the dynamics of it a little bit, just so it's more together and not all over the place. All the compressors are set to 12 milliseconds for attack, 51 milliseconds for release, 2-to-1 ratio, and a medium knee if there's a knee control. They are all doing about 5 to 7 decibel of gain reduction. Let's take a listen. In terms of compression, they're all extremely similar, to the point where if someone showed me these 7 audio clips without telling me they were compressed by 7 different compressors each, I probably wouldn't be able to tell that was the case at all. I did notice that some compressors change the tone of the acoustic guitar very slightly. For example, the Vintage Opto seems to have just a little bit more mid compared to the Platinum Digital. But the difference is so subtle that sometimes I don't even know if it's just placebo effect. After testing all these compressors out, I came to 3 conclusions. One is that they're all really good. Whether you are a professional audio engineer or a songwriter, these compressors should be able to satisfy a lot of your needs. Don't sleep on them just because they're stock plugins. Second is that never assume a compressor is bad just because it didn't work on a few sources. The Platinum Digital compressor didn't sound very good in most of the tests, but it sounded amazing on the bass. Third is that, damn, that Studio VCA is such a good compressor on almost everything. Good job, Apple. That's it for this video. Give it a like if you find it helpful and entertaining. Don't forget you can download a cheat sheet I created on these compressors for quick reference when you're mixing in the description. Subscribe if you want to see me compare these compressors to third-party paid compressor plugins, because that will be one of the next videos. Alright, Happy New Year, and I'll see you in the next one.